Hello, Merry Christmas, and welcome to a very special Christmassy edition of If You Know Your History. I'm here with Mark Webster, and we've got a wonderful guest. That's a special guest.
Actually, we have indeed. Shoreditch Santa, as of course, I've often been referred.
You're Shoreditch Santa. Because you've got a white beard.
It's the worst. It's the worst moment. I was Shoreditch Santa. Don't you know? It's when I bought. We was working on a TV show in Nottingham, and I
bought that red
jacket. I bought this. It's a big red coat, and it's set vintage shop, and I so wanted it. I even got the guy that we was doing the football show with. I said, "Could you pick it up for me? I'll pay you the money back." I got it the next time I was in Nottingham. I wore it out proudly on like Christmas Eve or something like that. Or just a few days before Christmas, I went into a bar underneath Old Street. I went round the corner, and the girl looked at me and said, "Father Christmas." And now I'm out. I'm out with long white hair, a big white beard, and a massive red coat on just before Christmas.
Like Shoreditch Santa.
And I became the Shoreditch Santa. Henceforth, Did you introduce our guest, John? Sorry, I digressed.
Yes. The laughter you can hear there.
Mr. Christopher Evans. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. You've inspired certainly what we're going to be talking about in this episode, but obviously we'll go into it in more detail in another one. One of your books is the Football Battalions, which is a lovely case history of the way that our people and war and the game all come together, I guess.
Yes, it is. And can I say Merry Christmas and God bless us, one and all?
You certainly can. And thank you for doing so.
Yes. The Football Battalions is really about all the footballers who went to war. And I think what is really interesting about it is the pressure that they were under. About the way the aristocrats and those who'd run society, and that is, society was completely different than the one we know now.
Sure.
And so it was a way that football in particular, as a working class sport, was put under huge pressure to go to war. And you also had the issue of the cricketers ending their season in September when cricket traditionally comes to an end, and rugby, they're amateurs, they can end at any time. Footballers were professionals, their contracts had to be honoured. But that didn't stop the pressure that they felt.
Well, we're going to do an episode on that.
Get into detail on that.
But we're going to do a particular sort of a very famous thing from the sort of the period in the trenches, and whether it actually is even true. I like to think it's true because it's such a heartwarming story. But it's about the Christmas Day truce.
It's Christmas Day football.
But it did inspire one of the great songs, "All Together Now" by the Farm.
All Together Now by the Farm.
Are we going to join in?
All together now.
All together.
It's almost like the clue was in the lyric there, wasn't it, really?
A very good friend of ours, actually, Pete Hooton.
Pete Hooton, obviously a massive football fan and fashion icon.
Yes.
Obviously was involved in that particular song. I'm going to defer, though, and thanks very much to Paul Brown, who's written a magnificent article for 442 many years ago now, and he broke it down to deal with this because of Christmas Day football. Now, Chris, I said to Johnny, I texted him over the other day and said, do you know, you won't believe how much Christmas Day football there was up until the mid-50s.
Yeah.
And his reply was, I'd love Christmas Day. I'm going to do the accent. I'd love to go football on Christmas Day. It's boring after dinner.
It is.
Now, two things are going on there.
We should do this John Tour Ice on the afternoon.
No. I was trying to pay tribute. But the thing, first of all, I think the biggest problem I got with that is he clearly doesn't eat big enough dinners because you can't walk after Christmas dinner.
That's true.
You're not going to get the full. But weirdly, and this goes back as far as 1880s, 1889, the first league match on a Christmas Day, Preston North End versus Villa. The bit that surprised me is, I'm thinking, how can anyone do that? It's because public transport was just running like normal. Apparently, because the Christmas Day off wasn't such a big deal.
No.
The country didn't shut down. Ergo, it was football.
I'm just surprised it's Villa Preston. I would have thought it'd been something closer, like
you would have thought.
I thought it would be in the derbies that would be on Christmas Day. It's just a travel.
1890, the first bit, they started, so a year later, the big derby started, because you say there's a logic there. But 1890, Blackburn versus Darwin, which was a local team in those days. Match abandoned because again they play so much football over that period. They would play Boxing Day as well, so 2 games within 24 hours. Match abandoned because both sides put out like second 11s to try and save themselves for tomorrow, and the crowds rioted. So that was the end of that one there. And a little bit later, you got mirror games: City, Chelsea, Chelsea, City. Again, though, the distance in between the two. Would you fancy a Boxing Day a Christmas Day game, Chris? In
No,
your
I
life?
usually stuffed myself and passed out by about 3 o'clock.
Yes,
so I'd be no good,
easy.
yeah. Yeah.
No, I.
What do you do on Christmas Day then, John?
We obviously have a Christmas dinner, but I always think the night was a bit of a no pubs are open. Everybody's half asleep, stuffed full of turkey. It's a bit of a night which is, you know what I mean?
No, but
Evening games then, an evening game on Christmas Day. What about
You've
that?
got too much energy because the 2 hours that you can go in the pub on Christmas Day are crucial because it's
Every
2
slows them
hours.
down, yeah.
You know,
That's the base drink.
Yes, so you got to get that squeezed in there.
You should definitely wear your red jumper on Christmas Day.
Yeah. Free drinks all round. Don't take me sleigh though. But after a big game, to drink like that, no. But it's but I can see the point because they had the crowds were enormous. 3.5 million, 1949. 3.5 million attendees at the Christmas Day games.
Wow. Well, I mean, the post-war boom is very famous. Isn't it? I still think it's the record for crowds. Isn't it? Just after the war, sense of optimism in the country. The sense of we're still here. It's enjoyable. The crowds were huge in the late 40s, weren't they?
But it's gonna.
But it's a different world of the entertainment options.
Yeah.
You didn't have
No,
that.
exactly.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You sit with Christmas dinner, you flop up in front of the television.
Yeah.
What would you do on a Christmas Day anyway? You know,
Yeah.
then, you know?
It would have been bereft of any joy, wouldn't
Yeah.
it? Apart from
And you wouldn't even
actually-
have turkey. You'd have had goose, wouldn't it? It was goose, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably exactly. So and also it's one of the very few days off that you're going to get. I mean, you're not far off of Saturday 3 o'clock's being invented simply to fit in with the 5.5 day week.
Yeah.
So that's still going to be alive and kicking.
Yeah.
So of course it's probably a golden opportunity to actually go and watch some football.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it made sense. Just a couple of other ones. 1925, no football at Highbury because we discussed this about Highbury before because it was the ground and the grounds were owned by St John's College of Divinity.
They were.
Right.
We did this to me, yeah.
So they wouldn't play on a religious day. So Highbury they couldn't use on that one there. And in 1917, the first of the big, which gets us nicely to the kind of the football related part, the first massive ladies football game. 10,000 people went and watched. And this was they played in Preston. £500 was raised for the War Hospital, and the team that won the game by 4-0 was the Dick Kerr Locomotive Company.
And it's in the book.
Dick Kerr Locomotive Company, famous across the decades for their locomotives and trams. And you can still see great examples in New Delhi, Queensland, and Aberystwyth.
Hey! Which is near Merthyr Tydfil-ish. We've got
I think
Merthyr
Rhonda's
Tydfil.
closer to Aberystwyth than myself.
Oh, it probably is.
It is,
It's
slightly,
really-
yeah. All depends which way you go, though, John. if you think about it.
I've opened the can of worms. But obviously, intentionally. Tell us about that game then.
Well, basically, it was they were approached by the Benevolent Fund to put on some sort of performance, and at that point, the women working in the munitions factory were actually teasing the boys and how bad they were at these friendly games they were doing. So originally, it was the boys taking on the girls. Then it morphed into sort of another factory taking on with the women, and that was the start of women's football and the boom that they experienced during the war. I mean, it went from there. Then people like Lily Parr became very famous, and there were huge crowds of Boxing Day games at Goodison Park as well. And then, of course, it got cancelled in 1921 for all sorts of dubious reasons,
Yes.
shall we say. Yeah.
Well, we talked about because the ladies' game was developed. It seemed
I think
to
the
be,
ladies' game would have gone the same way as the men's game if they had not cancelled it in 1921.
But I think ergo, which is why they did.
Yeah.
Seems to be so
Yeah,
much
there
of
was a
it, wasn't
feeling
it?
when they came back over from the war, the ones who survived, obviously, got a game back now, you don't have to do it
I mean, it's
anymore.
interesting. You know, when I was writing the book, I listened to the war stories you get on BBC. There was a woman there from Hopkinstown, just outside Pontypridd, which we both know. She said her favourite thing to do was to play football during the war.
Yeah.
So they actually not only replaced the men in the workplace, but they replaced the men on the sports field as well.
Totally.
You know?
And not only replace the men in the workplace, but productivity went up.
Exactly.
It's like there was no excuse to say
and the football was better.
Yeah, football was far better.
Yeah, but right, which gets okay. So that kind of gets us into the context of this story, which is allegorical, mythological, but is there basis in this? Not in this
football
idea.
was massively important. Look, I think without the two world wars, I think you would have seen the massive boom that we seen in the 50s, in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. That would have happened without it. I mean, you had clubs were donating footballs to regiments and battalions all the way through. Chelsea were very famous for doing that. There was instances of where they were going over the top. They were kicking footballs and playing mouth organs. the games were really important for morale and everything like that. So football was a massive part of their lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's obviously massively popular in Germany as well.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, we all know football was born in England, but spread very quickly to Scotland, Wales. But in Europe, it's hugely popular already. Spread all over the world, as we've spoken about with the train tracks. And I think what's fascinating, where Chris is brilliant, is that there's an amazing amount of excitement when the war starts. It's almost like it sounds awful, but like lads going away on a trip, fans, people cheering in the streets, and this real belief. I think this is what's important, that it's going to be over by Christmas. It'll be done by this famous thing that it'll be done by Christmas. So, a few years down the line, when we all talk about, I think the line was, when we end up they hated each other. That start was almost a bit of a shock to the system. We go over there, we'll win this war, and when we can set this up, well, Chris can explain brilliantly, is they were two equal sides, really, to use a sport analogy.
Yeah.
They fought one another to a standstill, and then there's this race to the course with 1,000 miles worth of trenches, runs from basically Switzerland to the North Sea. And it's an awful situation. It's almost like two implacable enemies of similar, potential, similar sort of, industry, and there's no winner. So basically an awful attritional sort of thing. And then these trenches are set up, famously. Christmas Day comes, and then Chris could take over. These men are stuck in these things, and the early signs are they're singing carols to each other.
They're not singing carols, they're singing Peace on Earth.
That's it,
and in the middle of a war zone, singing Peace on Earth.
Right.
The following day, they're going to try killing each other again. It's just bizarre. They start singing carols. The Germans put up candles along the top of the trenches.
No.
And then they come over and they start having communal burials. They start exchanging gifts, cigarettes, German sausages, bully beef, that type of thing. And this is then where the myth of football comes along. Were they playing football as an organised match, or were they just kicking the bully tin around each other, or a bag of rags? We don't know.
If you get enough fellas together, something's going to get kicked, and there'll be two sides, won't there?
But were they organised? And they say, Robert Graves famously wrote that there was an England versus Germany game, the Germans won 3-2. We don't know if that ever happened. But there must have been, these non-organised games. Then it was just
there's an old joke where the Germans went on penalties when that's
Would it have been? I'm going to guess. I mean, and as you say, perhaps a lot of it is lost in the mist of time. The myth of it all. Is this basically just going to be the Tommies and the German equivalent of the Tommies deciding? Because what would the officers have been thinking at this particular stage?
They probably sat in chateaus drinking their red wine and enjoying their poultry.
Paying little on our attention.
But it's interesting, isn't it? In 1915, the following year, they actually put orders down banning that happening.
See, that's why I asked.
Again, was that something to do with morale or something? I don't know. Perhaps they just didn't like it.
So it was a kind of the people's movement as such.
I mean,
what
we do know is 100,000 soldiers took part in that impromptu truce that Christmas. And it does make you think, doesn't it? When they just say, what was the point in all this, and just down it all.
And that was the worry. That was the direction came from headquarters. Look, we've got to encourage the men to start firing again.
But they've got to hate them.
Well, because if you talk to somebody and you meet them halfway,
you don't hate them.
And you swap their family photographs, it's pretty difficult then.
You've got more in common than you have in difference with each other, haven't you? So that's
And I think, I think Chris is absolutely right. I've no doubt that footballs would have been kicked around or jumbled rags or bully beef tins. I don't think... Do I think there was an organised game with a result? I'm not sure, but I do probably think they would kick the football amongst themselves. That's probably what happened.
Yeah, generally I think that happened. I don't think there's any doubt football matches were played. I just don't think they were organised with a referee and a whistle and posts and everything.
Someone marking out the pitch.
Somebody putting their 2 nicks down the goalpost. Helmets for the goalpost.
Yeah, exactly. No, but as you say, the thing about it is, and it just goes to service the point that John's made, is that it's classically the universal language, isn't it?
Yeah. And
that's
also,
what these fellas know.
It's the futility of it all. You go over the top to kill each other. This time they're going over the top, shake each other's hands. So what did it mean in the big thing to them?
Yes.
What was it all about anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I think. That's why I think it's very important. Well,
we're going to have a quick break. Come back to it. So here's a question for half time. There's a Scottish team who infamously lost 9 of their starting 11 in the First World War. So which football team was that? Hello and welcome back to If You Know Your History, the second half. The whistle has blown and we are doing a Christmas special for you all about the Christmas Truce, the match and the football battalions of the First World War. And you know, we were just talking there before we come on there, how much has entered popular culture, the idea of this football match. You know,
Yes.
the John Lewis advert, Pipes of Peace video, Paul McCartney, the song by the Farm, All Together Now. It's this image we've got which carries the modern day of these poor young lads, like all in their late teens, early 20s, the fertility of war, the trenches, which even as a kid I always thought was the most miserable thing, you know, the muck and the damp and the misery. But they play this magical football match in no man's land, don't they?
Yeah, we kind of need it, don't we? I think the mythology works for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. We all come together. I mean, at the end of the day, the war wasn't as popular as we think it is. I mean, if you read Chelsea programmes, I read a lot of Chelsea programmes during the writing the book, there were people writing in the Chelsea programmes going, I can't afford to go to war. Because again, the world was different. We didn't have nuclear families and we'd extended families.
No.
Your in-laws would be living with you. Your grandmother might be living with you. And once that money gone, and you might be the only one bringing the money in, once that money gone, that was it. That family could be destitute.
Yeah.
And I think that was really important about it. So we need that idea that to break up that, as you say, John, that horrible feeling of the muck and the bullets and the cold and the wet and the futility of it all.
That's right. The Great War
I mean,
goes there.
pre always but really important to say pre-welfare state. We don't
of course.
we don't understand this only since the Second World War. Really, we've had this safety net. Before that, destitution was around the corner.
Everybody's fundamentally making up as they go along, aren't they? You know, it's cobbled together, isn't it? It's this kind of weird thing. You mentioned Chelsea there. Just finish on the Christmas Day games because this story's great. 1937, Chelsea at home to Charlton, I think it is. Yeah. Thick, proper London pea souper. Sam Bartram's in goal for Chelsea. Can't see the other end of the pitch. Can't see anything. Don't know what's going on until he sees a silhouette emerge through the fog. And as he gets close, it works out it's a copper who turns up to say they abandoned the match 20 minutes ago. They're all in the dressing room. So Sam Bartram trudges off the field of play.
He's thinking he's kept a clean sheet, bless him. And
That's right, yeah. Or the lads are keeping them well away from goal here. So
I
was
going to say, I asked the question in the first half,
Yes.
and I think this is really poignant, and Chris can help us with this. And it really strikes home, really, sort of how deadly this war was. I asked the question, which football team lost 9 of their starting 11 in the First World War? And of course, it was Heart of Midlothian, infamously. And chat us through about that.
Well, Hearts won the title now, yeah. So at that point, you had Celtic and Rangers as dominant as they are now. I mean, there's only teams like Hibernian and the third Celtic had won the title at that point. Very few teams outside. And third Lanark was a Glasgow side as well.
Yeah,
so there's very
regiment
few
side.
Yeah, very few sides outside Glasgow. They led all through the season. And one by one, they were joining up to the Craze Battalion, as it was called in Scotland. And one by one, they were joining up. They were getting the vaccinations. They were doing the training. It caught up with them in the end, and Celtic caught them up. Celtic and Rangers at that point had not seen any of their players join up to the McRae's Battalion or any of the battalion, and it was always seen as Hearts' title rather than the Celtics.
It's weird. There's famously West Ham's got a connection during that period as well. And what you've just mentioned there, it never occurred to me until I kind of looked into them. Up the Hammers was their battle cry, is to go out to that. But the reason that they were called the 13th Service Battalion of Essex Regiment, and they were formed in December 1914. They eventually kind of landed in France a year later. But they were fundamentally assembled by the mayor to say, we'll put together a bunch of lads to go out and do their bit.
Do you know why they didn't go into the football battalion? They were wrong side of the River Lee.
That would make sense.
That was the reason they didn't go. That's why Orient went to the 70th Middlesex Regiment, and West Ham went to the other side, because the other side of the River Lee.
But it gets back to that kind of DIY thing, doesn't it? That it took a civic-minded mayor to decide we can provide you with some soldiers.
But again, isn't it politicians again? Should I say about my own profession? But isn't it politicians all over? This is a wonderful chance to make my name. You know what I mean? Yeah. The guy who founded the football battalion, William Joyce and Hicks, had beaten Churchill in a by-election, wanted to make his name. In the 20s, became the Home Secretary. You know what I mean? I do think there's like a moth to a flame with a politician when it comes to a war sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, you see that as well.
Yes.
Local politicians and national ones as well.
And guess who gets to suffer for their avarice? It's us, isn't it?
We chat with the football battalions, but it's a different sport, obviously rugby, but I did a series in Wales about 20 years ago, and the Welsh rugby captain, Johnny Williams, he volunteered to join up, and it was a huge rallying call. Thousands wanted to follow him into a battalion, and somebody once described it. It would be like Gareth Bale, for argument's sake, joining up.
Yes,
and everybody wanted to join. And he was killed in the Battle of Mametz Woods. And I was doing the reading, and 2 of the Welsh team also died with him that day. He was from Cardiff. The other two were from Rhondda. They were forwards. And I was doing this thing, and he married his wife just before he went. And he dies. He dies actually of his wounds a day later because obviously there's no antibiotics. Lots of them died in there of that, an injury. It was dreadful. And he dies in this sort of like clearing station just behind the lines. And I'm going through this thing. I never forget it. And I was like looking, and his wife didn't have any children, and he had no surviving family. And I was like, he was gone. He was the Welsh rugby captain. He'd scored a try against New Zealand, the famous match where they sung My Hen Lad Fanade for the first time for a game, so it became the Welsh national anthem because of a rugby crowd.
Right.
And he died, and he's lost into time. And I had this amazing feeling like sadness
Yeah.
that he was just a yellowing photograph in a club.
He's
wall
kind
now.
of wiped off the map of history, isn't he? Yeah.
He was the most famous sportsman in Wales at
I mean,
that
the
point.
thing I found about Mehmet Woods, I said earlier, is that you walk down a farm track. You can't
Yeah.
drive down there. You go, well, you walk for feels like miles
I
down
know.
there. And suddenly you see the Welsh Dragon with the barbed wire in there.
Yeah.
And it's this calm and peace, and you
Yeah.
can't believe that. And there's a graveyard opposite. But
Yes.
You can't believe all that
The
carnage
carnage.
happened there. Yeah?
No, it's
And I did a
true.
little bit, which is great for the listeners to understand. I obviously did a bit of research about the battle that morning, and I'll never forget this. So this is the battalion. There was Cardiff City players in that battalion. There was all kinds of sportsmen who were being encouraged to grow up. This was Haig's army that they recruited for the Somme.
Right.
These were the ordinary people they were
Pals-
going around.
Pals Battalion.
Pals battalions.
Serve with your
You
mates,
can
you know
serve
what
with your
I mean?
mates and all that. So all,
Yeah.
they were really push. And they went over the top, and the smoke cover was blown away almost instantly. And they hadn't realised there was a crack Ruhr regiment in what they call a crossfire position, which is deadly, in what they call flat iron copse right opposite the woods. So you couldn't walk through the hail. It was impossible to walk
Right.
through. So they were wiped out wave after wave after wave. And on the first day, they didn't break through their positions, the Welsh division. And it's really got me poignant. They raided, but they hadn't managed to break through because of this deadly crossfire. And the message came back from headquarters, they must try harder.
Oh!
And this is the bit that broke my heart. The soldiers felt embarrassed in the trenches that they hadn't broke through.
They've been shamed.
That they'd been shamed. And they broke through a day and a half later and did it, took the woods, lost the woods again 6 months later, won it back 6 months later. It was that most futile idea of taking something,
Yes.
the most pointless thing, But it was, you realise, as Chris is right, the social pressures that are to bear, You have to prove yourself as a soldier. You have to go and serve. Then you have to be brave. Then you have to sort of walk into a hail of lead. These things were just expected of you.
So,
you know?
and of
Yeah,
course,
the big-
respect your betters.
Yeah, the big fear was being called a coward.
Yeah.
If you listen to those stories, those who served in World War I, that fear of being called a coward was really, really important.
Yes,
What
it
did
was
you
him,
find
wasn't
in,
it?
obviously, so the book's called The Football Battalions. What did you, when you're going through this, was it a lot of the same story around the country? The way, as we've been discussing here, how regiments come together, how groups, squads, people came together.
I mean, the football battalions, it was a case of, serve with Vivian Woodward. Again, another one we talk about, lost the midst of time. Actually was a successful England captain. He won the Olympic gold medal in 1908 and retained in 1912. Never speak about him anymore. But he was in the football battalion. He was used. He marched around Stamford Bridge. Come and join up with serve with Jack. It was all these types of people that were brought in. Richard McFadden, William Jonas from Clapham Orient, as was then before they became Leighton Orient. They were all sort of used as a way of recruiting these people into it. Do you know what I mean? But what I do get a sense of, and I said, the football programs in particular, the people writing in, they weren't particularly happy about this.
Really?
No, they weren't particularly happy about it. And even
Well,
in the
they've been
press as well.
exploited, I guess.
Yeah, they had been, yeah.
Yeah.
They've been shamed into doing it as well. And also, you've got to look at it like this as well. You talk about rugby. It was easy. If you were a rugby player, it was easier to join up. You were an amateur, you didn't have a contract.
Yeah.
If you were a cricketer, if you were a professional, you had a contract. But if you were one of the aristocrats,
Gentlemen and
you
players,
didn't
yeah.
have to gentlemen and players. But footballers had professional contracts. And again, the sort of signals from government were totally crossed over. 1 minute you've got to honour your contract if you're in business, but if you're a football player, you've got to forget about your contract and go and play. You know what I mean? And also, a lot of those clubs were on their backside in terms financially as well. They couldn't afford to send players,
Of course,
because it was all based on this is days before we had sponsorship or shirts being sold. They were based on the gate, who came through the gate as well. And the other thing as well, what you had with the press was, it was cowards today at Stamford Bridge. They signed nobody up. Yet then you look at the pictures, and most of the pictures have got footballers. They've also got people in uniform, people who are injured, children. A lot of people were already signed up, and a lot of children couldn't go anyway. No one
Right.
could do one person, and they had these dignitaries there, and they didn't listen to them at all. And it's very patriarchal sort of society as well. You've never seen before. You know, it shows how much the aristocrats were still in power. We still had a
completely.
very Victorian society in 1914. You know,
But it's interesting because Ninian Park was named after Lord Ninian. I spoke about him, and he died in the First World War.
Yes.
He led one of a Swansea battalion, ironically. And the irony is that they found his body from no man's land because these boys from Swansea managed to drag it back. So there's a real sort of resonance in that he went off and fought. But, you know, me and Chris were talking, there's a wonderful statue outside Cardiff City Stadium of the most famous captain. He won the FA Cup for them in 1927, Fred Keener. And he'd fought in the Football Battalion that Chris has written the book about. And he was really badly injured in the thigh, wasn't he?
He said he'd never play again.
Said he'd never play again. And he came back, not only played, but he won the FA Cup for Cardiff
Yes.
City. Now, there's a man who deserves a statue outside of football.
Totally.
and
would
it is a
work.
beautiful statue. He's cradling the cap. He's got a big smile on his face. And anything around, it sort of attracts people. But tributes around it, don't they?
It's the place where everybody meets. It's really nicely done. He's a Cardiff boy. His father.
And
was
it's
a
not very.
stonemason.
That doesn't sound triumphal, does it? At
No,
all? It just sounds like kind of. You know,
They lost in the final in 1925, famously,
And where was the Arsenal goalkeeper from?
Ron the Boy.
Mardy.
That's right, Marty.
And that's why the jersey's always washed.
Always
beforehand.
watched for the games.
Yeah.
He played in his jersey, and Marty is probably the most famous pit village in the world. His
wow.
nickname was Little Moscow. It
They used to say, dare I say it now? I'm sorry for anybody still living around. They reckon the dogs used to walk around in pairs up there.
Yeah, it's a really tough little mine in town.
Yeah, you're all talking big here, you two now.
Fred, just to finish off on Fred
Yeah.
Keener. He comes in 1925. They lose the FA Cup final to Sheffield United, and he comes back to Cardiff, and there's 150,000 people in a civil reception just for losing the FA Cup. Right?
Yeah.
That's how big the FA Cup is, and he famously says to them, "Don't be down in the mouth. I promise you, I'll go and win the cup for you." And he did it 2 years later.
Did it anyway.
And do you know the great thing about that? If you read the newspapers of the day, there's no mention that he was a World War I veteran.
No.
None at all. And do you know what the captain was of Arsenal that day? Charlie Buchan.
That's
who
right.
Who formed Charlie Buchan's Football Weekly.
Yes.
Again, absolutely no mention. They were both veterans. No mention at all. Just accepted because everybody was a veteran.
So everyone's got a war record, as it were.
Yeah.
Is it therefore not a coincidence or anything we're saying here that it's said that 1914 is the first time a king has attended, or it would have been, the head of state attended an FA Cup final?
Yes, he was.
I'm going to guess. So King George turns up at the 1940 Cup. I'm assuming this is an attempt to, again, rally the troops in a quite literal sense.
No, really, because the war hadn't started at that point. That was
Oh,
April,
okay, so
April
he's-
94.
so
I
it's
think
just-
what was important about that, Mark, I think that was when it became out in society. That was the coming out of
Yes, quite.
football into wider society. The acceptance by wider society that this was now the working class sport. This was the up-and-coming sport. This was about to take cricket over as the national obsession, I would say.
Yeah.
That's what that was. And the score was Sheffield United beat Liverpool, didn't they?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It wasn't at Wembley. Would it have been at Crystal Palace?
Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace.
And the one in 1915, the Khaki final, was in Crystal Palace. It was in Old Trafford because Crystal Palace had been used as a military ground.
That's right.
Oh, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
And it's so you've got this thing, sort of like I was saying. So the Football Battalion, the Middlesex Regiment. Tell us a little bit about the formation of that, and obviously Keener fought it. And Walter Tull is an interesting character for me because it's an amazing story about him, isn't it?
Tull was basically a care home child. Originally his father came from Barbados. His mother and father both died very young, and he grew up in a care home with his brother. And his brother was taken in by a dentist in Edinburgh, and they got split. They were split up. There were two brothers in a care home. He stayed in the care home, then became an apprentice printer, and eventually played for Clapton. Then went to Spurs, and he was, as I mentioned, Vivian Woodward was the superstar of that period. He was his replacement at Spurs, and he went to a game at Bristol, and the crowd were absolutely vile to him, to the extent there had been arrests in this day and age. But he got blamed for being racially abused, and never played for Spurs again, and went to Northampton. He became a legend for the Cobblers, who was managed by Herbert Chapman, who clearly went on to
bigger and better things, one might argue.
There was a brilliant documentary made about Walter Tull, and he became an officer. It was very rare, obviously, for a man of colour at that time. And there's a really poignant photograph of him stood there, and they all point out to it. And he stood, and they are stood with space with him, because the other officers don't want to be stood.
But he also grew a
next to
moustache.
black man. Yeah.
Do you notice that? When he became an officer, he grew a moustache.
Yeah, he grew a moustache.
Quite right.
And he was extraordinarily brave as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the thing was, he had trench fever when he was with the 70th Middlesex Regiment, and they believed he had shell shock. He came back home and recovered, and they sent him back out there to the 23rd Middlesex Regiment, and he died in 1918, towards the end of the war.
They couldn't find his body, and
Somebody tried to drag his body.
Yeah,
Tom Billingham tried to drag his body,
but
who was a Northampton keeper, and he actually had him on the back, and obviously smoke and bombs and guns, and his face, his The eyes are running, his nose are running, he's disoriented. Leave him there.
That's Tom Billingham, the goalie. Yeah,
Tom
and I think almost given everything we just said about Walter Toll, I think it was one of the most touching things is born in Folkestone and dies 21 miles away in Calais.
Yeah.
So that's his journey.
Wow. Yeah.
It's everything he did and that stretch of water.
There's a beautiful there's a tribute to him now in Northampton, I believe. It's worth going to see. Yeah.
And if you go into Maidenhead for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission headquarters, there's a cardboard cutout of him as you walk into the library there as well.
Yeah.
And he's also 50 pence. He's on a 50 pence piece as well, isn't he?
Is he?
Yeah. He is.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
In the terms of you doing the book, did you find that we are better at acknowledging this story now? You know, has distance helped us?
I think in terms of Walter Tull particularly,
yes.
I think we understand what he went through, and I think his story was buried for so long, and it's good now that's come forward as well. But I think in terms of Fred Keenan as well, you know, as much as there's some horrible stories and then some horrible things happen to them, it ends with such a wonderful, uplifting story that he lifts the cup.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing.
I've always, because I did a bit of, I worked with a guy called Bob Simmons, who was a very famous voice in presenting Welsh sport from the 70s and 80s, great guy. And he said that Fred Keenan used to do like some commentary for HTV in the late 60s.
Wow.
I was like, Fred Keenan. He said, you know, it's like when somebody said the other day, there's loads of second voice commentary of Fred Perry on Wimbledon in the 60s and 70s, and you go, really, it's almost like I don't know, like Henry VIII jumping out of a portrait. You go, because Fred Keenan's seen such a thing from the past. Yeah. You have the idea of him doing some commentary on HTV in the 60s. He was still around.
That's amazing.
But you think about it, you think about Steptoe, understand, right? Albert Steptoe was always played as a World War I veteran.
That's right, yeah.
And you think about it now, you know, that's now our lifetime, you know.
Yeah.
He
did his little medal.
Yeah, medal. I remember when he went to France, the last time I was here, I had a backpack on me back. That's right. Carrying me end.
That reminds me of that great story in our 77 European Cup final, and Bob Paisley was a very, very specific character. Again, another veteran. And they're all waiting to see what the big speech is going to be, and he comes in and he goes, last time I was here, lad, I was on the front of a tank liberating the place. And walked out, and like Keegan said, if you can't go out and play football when you're that,
what are you going to do?
That's going to do you as a speech, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Just to kind of finish off, the mythology of this, whether it be true or not, I think there's a football in the Dover Castle War Museum, you know, where the bunkers are and stuff like that, which is painted and purports to be a football from the trench game of that era.
Oh, is it? I definitely think Chris is right. They definitely kicked footballs over the top when they were going over the top. So it may have been a football there, and it could have been from the game. But there were lots of footballs in the trenches, weren't there?
There was. Yeah. Originally, I wanted to use the football for the front of the book. You know, I couldn't use it because they put on their football battalions with 3 T's in it.
Really?
I don't put it on. I thought it was a spelling mistake.
Oh, one of the great times.
AI did.
Exactly. But listen, fantastic story.
Awesome, unbelievable. I mean, you know, it's such an important part of our history, and also really important, Chris. What you've done is you've contextualised. Sometimes, like, people are in positions and the pressure's put on people, and they're sort of forced into situations that are almost incomprehensible to us.
But I think what is important is also they come to life. I mean, we talk about Joe Mercer Jr.
Yes.
Joe Mercer Sr. was in the war and actually died very young, and he didn't know his father because he was always ill. But Joe Mercer was a bit of a bruiser to the point Everton wouldn't sign him because he was always involved in punch-ups. And I find it interesting, William Jonas is in there. He had a punch-up with Joe Orme, who was the Millwall goalkeeper. He signed up the Football Battalion. He also had a punch-up with Joe Mercer Sr. Got sent off, and he ended up in the Football Battalion as well. Yeah. So I wanted to get this out as well. They were real. Yeah. They were real people.
Yeah,
you know?
feisty stuff.
What battles did they fought in the Somme?
They fought the Somme, yeah. They fought Develwood as well, which was horrendous, if you know about that. And the worst thing about that, you go there now, the Football Battalion Memorial's on the corner. Then you've got the South Africa Memorial. You walk into Devilwood, and you could be out for a walk in the afternoon with the kids. Yeah. No, I walked around there with my son and my daughter, and it's like, this is the type of place we just go for a
it's well worth walk, you know? It's well worth visiting all those places.
Yes.
I mean, very
Arras
poignant.
is well worth it.
Arras, Ypres, where they do the last post every night. It's very, very, very moving.
Vimy Ridge is very good. Yeah. The Canadians are.
And is the Football Battalion itself well represented and documented, you know, within the army?
Yes, they're all documented. So there's 3 of them. There's the 17th Middlesex Regiment, there's the 23rd Middlesex Regiment, known as the 1st and 2nd Football Battalions. Then there's the McRae Battalion, which is the Scottish Battalion, which the Hearts would have joined.
Yeah. There you go.
Wow. Yeah. No, it's brilliant, and it's brilliant that you're telling the story and bringing these people to life and keeping the story goes. It's such an important story. It's such an important part of the history of football.
It is indeed, completely. That's right.
Thanks very much for joining us. Merry Christmas again, yeah.
Yes, once again.
And you know what to do. We're going to be getting Chris back because Chris is also an authority on Don Revie and
Yes,
Leeds.
we're getting stuck into Don Revie. That'll
Yes.
be coming up in
In the
the
new year.
ensuing weeks.
Yes.
And I can assure you there's tenuous links to Merthyr in there as well.
We'll be working it in
Like
if we can.
That needed to be ensured.
You know the drill. You know the thing. We're on X, Facebook, Insta. What else? YouTube.
That's right, and of course you can subscribe for
TikTok.
zero.
We're on TikTok.
Oh, we're
now.
on TikTok now.
I think so. I think my daughter Katie was doing some TikTok.
Oh,
stuff
that's
with- We had some
TikTok.
great
I know.
responses, didn't we? So,
That's
yeah.
right, in which we both showed so little football knowledge.
Yes, exactly.
Remarkable. Go watch.
There we go. From the trenches of the First World War to TikTok. What
There
a
you
journey.
go. What a journey.
Thank you very much and have a lovely Christmas.